When we reach peak humanity around the year 2050, we might have a population of 9.5 or so billion human beings alive simultaneously. Where will they be? Most human beings will never leave the country in which they were born. For economic or other reasons, they are stuck in place. Most Egyptians will never leave Egypt. Most Indians will never leave India. Most Brazilians will never leave Brazil. Many of those countries, roughly more than 150 out of 200 countries, don't have very powerful passports. Whether young or old, rich or poor, they can't just get up and get on a plane and go wherever they want. So yes, there is this entrenched structural inequality of access to the privilege of migration. That's
the movement of American hegemony is not so strict. It's quite fluid. And in a similar ways, the movement of people from country to country is also quite fluid. But just based off the kind of research Ollie and I have been doing, we feel that there are still kind of large inequalities within those movements of people. And I mean, like all resources and forms of capital, the distribution isn't equal. So are we kind of seeing an ingraining of inequality here with just this added factor of movement capital?
Well, again, there just is no top-down imposition of an optimal distribution of people around the world. This was the point of departure for my book, Move. I said we have almost 9 billion people in the world. We have just over 8 billion people in the world today. When we reach peak humanity around the year 2050, we might have a population of 9.5 or so billion human beings alive simultaneously. Where will they be? And one of my principal arguments from, again, a macro standpoint was we have a great misalignment. There's a misalignment in the geography of natural resources, right? Where are the resources versus where are the people? Where are the borders versus where is the economic activity versus where are the people versus where are the resources? So a misalignment of natural geography, political geography, functional geography, and human geography. There is a great distortion. And we have evolved into that, stumbled into that reality, right? As a result of where we have economic activity, where we've placed borders, and so on and so forth. Rectifying that, one way to rectify that misalignment is by moving people, right? People move to where they're needed, to where there are resources, where there's climate stability, political stability. Those societies may or may not accept them. They may have to move from one place to another, to another, to another. So a constant resorting. I started out thinking that move meant one directional moves for one set of people from A to B. Call it from south to north. By the end, I realized that I should have called it moving, because actually it's a perpetual nomadism in a way of hundreds of millions of people seeking to find their own place in this, evolving demographic landscape. So that's, again, a huge part of the fluidity. So there isn't one answer. There isn't one final map. There isn't one optimal, perfect distribution of people, because demographics is very complex. It's always changing. People are needed in some places and then needed somewhere else, and so on and so forth. So that's for me, one of the fascinating things has been looking at diasporas. I'll give you an example. So, the Indian diaspora, I myself was born in India, migrated via the Middle East to the United States with my family. And you would now see Indian Americans being very entrenched. But I went to high school in Germany, where I was the only ethnically Indian person within, call it 250 kilometers radius, right? And but over the last 35 years that I've been traveling in and out of Germany, I've now noticed that there's, literally hundreds of thousands of Indians in Germany. According to the last count, about 550,000 Indians live in Germany. And so what happens is that within a single generation, migration begets more migration, because, as I was saying before, most migration is chain migration, people following their family. So if before you would say, why would any Indian ever go to Germany? 5 years later, the reason is, because I've got a cousin there. And then you've suddenly got 1,000 cousins there. And suddenly you've got a whole towns and villages full of Indians there. And so that's how these things evolve over time. So where you thought there was nothing, there is eventually something, and then a lot. And that happens on a planetary scale much faster than we realize.
Right. Would you agree that the higher your ability to move, so the stronger your passport, the more privilege you have in the world? So those kind of from countries that don't have that ability with weaker passports actually face some sort of global inequality.
Of course, that is true, but I would also break it down by age. So I want to make a fundamental point, because you're obviously right about passport apartheid, right, in a way, but it was ever thus to some degree. Although, unless you're talking about involuntary movements, because during the British Empire, literally tens of millions of people were forcibly relocated between South Asia, East Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Caribbean, right? So to be clear,
Mm.
that's not what you're talking about right now. Right now, you're saying that
No,
the
yeah,
fact is
voluntary, more voluntary,
most
yeah.
yeah most human beings will never leave the country in which they were born. For economic or other reasons, they are stuck in place. Most Egyptians will never leave Egypt. Most Indians will never leave India. Most Brazilians will never leave Brazil. Most Nigerians will never leave Nigeria. Many of those countries, roughly more than 150 out of 200 countries, don't have very powerful passports. Whether young or old, rich or poor, they can't just get up and get on a plane and go wherever they want. So yes, there is this entrenched structural inequality of access to the privilege of migration. That said, I want to not necessarily flip things on its head, because that is true and that is lamentable. But you are young people and you have a young audience. And I want to remind everyone that there has never been a better time in the history of the world to be a young person who, A, has skills, some skill that is needed somewhere in the world, if not where you are physically, then somewhere else, and to be mobile, like the capacity to relocate. You don't have to take care of elderly. You don't have a job you have to maintain where you are. So if you have a skill and if you are mobile, then even with the worst passport in the world today, you can probably get accepted to go somewhere. You don't have a criminal record. You have some technical or vocational capability or skill. You can go online and fill out a digital form on your mobile, perhaps for the Canadian government or some other country, and you are going to get access to that country, right? There's a good shot that's going to happen. So yes, we could speak purely numerically, blindly about the human population and say, oh my God, it's tragic that 5 billion people are stuck in place and may never leave. But if you focus on the youth demographic that is most likely to want to go somewhere and has the physical capability to go somewhere, and if they have some skill, it might be the best time in world history, right? Because you can digitally apply, just go, right? And you will be wanted somewhere. There's this country that needs you and wants you. And I think that's a pretty powerful statement. So I myself, again, ethically am as, torn up about, like you are, about the macro state of affairs, the initial conditions, as you might say. But I also see the flip side of opportunity, given the demographic imbalances in the world, the need for young people to stimulate economies. And that's why you have 100 countries with nomad visa, digital visa, e-visa, kinds of programs today. So the notion that the world is turning inward and the world is anti-globalist and the world is anti-migrant is just simply factually not true.
What do you make of the discourse concerning immigration in the US and mainland Europe today in 2025?
You say, and I quote, "History is a set of layers of soil and sediment, enriching and fertilizing each other." I think the history of colonialism is not a history of fertilization.
Sure, but 2025 is not 1945.